Formula One was born in Europe from what was Grand Prix racing pre-World War II, an elite band of racers and constructors delighting in the purity of wheel-to-wheel combat. And from the outset, at the 1950 British Grand Prix, Alfa Romeo was the dominant marque, with Italian Giuseppe Farina, F1's first pole sitter, race winner and world champion. But his reign was short-lived, with the maestro Juan Manuel Fangio backing it up for the Turin marque in 1951. Fangio was undeniably the king of that opening decade, with the talented Argentine going toe-to-toe with Ferrari's maiden star, Alberto Ascari, who romped home to the sport's first title double in 1952 and 1953. But the maestro, only focused on racing the most competitive car, came back to win the next 4 consecutive, his 5 overall, a record that stood for 45 years, earned for 4 different marques. Alfa Romeo, Mercedes, where he partnered great Brit Sir Stirling Moss, who long admired the squad's capabilities.
I was driving this car once. This broke up here, the windscreen, and I had to come in. 49 seconds later, I went away with one fitted, which is pretty quick. But the next race, if that broke, you just push a button here and another one came up. And you know, that's the way Mercedes work. It doesn't happen twice.
Fangio also won for Ferrari and Maserati, with whom the Argentine took his 24th and final victory, arguably his greatest ever, at the Nürburgring in 1957, in which he caught and passed the Ferraris of Mike Hawthorn and Peter Collins, who were 51 seconds ahead after a botched pit stop with just 8 laps to go. Hawthorn came back to win the crown in 1958, Great Britain's first world champion, but retired soon after given the death of his teammate Collins at the Nürburgring that year. Though British squad Vanwall was the inaugural Constructors' champion, care of victories from Moss, Tony Brooks and Stuart Lewis-Evans. And the Brits would make it 3 straight, with Cooper closing out the 1950s. The swinging 60s was a time of great change in the world, and in F1, it meant the emergence of British privateers who took on the establishment with customer engines and cars. Like the Cooper Climax, Australia's Sir Jack Brabham raced to secure back-to-back world title doubles in 1959 and 1960.
Jack Brabham, the world champion, was in demand for autographs.
Black Jack would storm to his 3rd and final crown in 1966, and in a car bearing his own name, a record that may never be broken. The years in between, a part of F1's golden era, were all about technical innovation, with 1962's breakthrough, Colin Chapman's Lotus 25, that had the sport's first ever fully stressed monocoque chassis. One that was used to maximum effect by Jim Clark, who stormed to 2 world championships in the 25 and updated 33. Clark died at the height of his powers, aged just 32, but his memory will live on as a British hero, one able to massage incredible results from the often fragile cars produced by Colin Chapman, Lotus's iconic founder and designer, their partnership legendary. And it was a reflection of the danger of racing cars in those days, with his contemporaries frequently having to attend funerals.
At the time that I was driving, whether it was Jim Clark or Graham Hill or Jack Brabham or a whole bunch of us, we were at more funerals, more memorial services, you know, having mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, girlfriends and wives crying on our shoulders.
Sir Jackie Stewart won his first F1 World Championship at the end of the 1960s, with the Scot just getting started. His crown coming after the success of Phil and Graham Hill, the pair unrelated. And John Surtees, who remains the only man to win world titles on 2 and 4 wheels. While Denny Hulme continued Brabham's success in 1967, the only New Zealander to lift the crown. The British privateer renaissance continued through the 1970s, but the first season of the decade was one of its most tragic, including the death of team owner Bruce McLaren in a Can-Am testing crash at Goodwood, beloved Williams racer Piers Courage in the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, and Austrian hotshot Jochen Rindt, who is the only driver to have been posthumously awarded the F1 World Championship. Rindt's former teammate Emerson Fittipaldi, though, raced on with Lotus and won the 1962 crown for F1 boss Colin Chapman, before switching to McLaren from 1974 when he lifted his second. And the Sao Paulo native, whose 2 titles were bookended by 2 from Sir Jackie Stewart, making 3 overall, has seen it all.
Looking on the history of motor race, the cycle of success of a team, it always happens. Sometimes a team can be 3, 4, 5 years competing and winning.
McLaren's next big star would be James Hunt, who secured the 1976 title fighting with another successful Austrian, Niki Lauda, who brought the first world championship to Maranello for 11 years, Lauda taking 2 more after a fiery crash that almost claimed his life. Lotus's final championship was won by American icon Mario Andretti, who had grown up in Italy seeing his idol, Alberto Ascari, race at Monza. But unlike Ascari, Andretti didn't do it for Ferrari. That feat would be done the following season, 1979, by the South African straight talker Jody Scheckter, who was helped to the flag by support from teammate Gilles Villeneuve.
I don't think it's really changed at all. I think you have to have a car, and the car in the right environment for the car. I think in our days there were different tires and things like that, so you had to have a little bit more in place.
The late 1970s and early 1980s saw aerodynamics start to play a leading role in success on track, with Williams' 1980 car, the FW07, using ground effect for standout results, including both titles, Alan Jones locking in with team owner Sir Frank and his then technical chief, Sir Patrick Head.
It was great. I mean, Patrick and Frank and myself got on like a house on fire. We're all similar age. We all had the same ambitions and desires. We're all hungry, and we all gelled together. We all got on extremely well. And the culmination of all of that was winning the World Championship, which was fantastic.
Jones was replaced by Finnish hard-charger Keke Rosberg for 1982 and lifted the crown in his debut campaign for Williams, and with just 1 win, equaling Mike Hawthorne's 1958 record for the fewest race victories in a championship campaign. But it would take another 5 years until the next Williams driver's crown, with the might of Brabham and then McLaren taking over as the sport's dominant force. Nelson Piquet taking his 3rd title with the squad in 1987. After a no-holds-barred fight with his teammate Nigel Mansell, one that saw it take a second back-to-back Constructors' title in the penultimate year of the sport's previous turbo era.
Types of car I drove was very, very demanding. We didn't have a power steering wheel, we don't have a automatic gear change, these kind of things, and we have such a lot of even more horsepower in qualifying than the cars we have today. It was a different time.
But McLaren returned to dominance in 1988 via a new partnership with Honda and new driver in Ayrton Senna.
There was always a way that he mentally approached his driving. How do I get the best out of myself, for one, but how do I get the best out of the equipment at the same time? Back then, there was no data, per se. There was a couple of lines, braking lines, maybe a bit of speed, maybe a little bit of movement on the damper and stuff like that. It's very, very basic.
McLaren notched up 4 straight world title doubles with a record 15 wins from 16 races in 1988 and 10 from 16 the following year. Senna and Prost spending 2 full seasons at war with each other. Thanks for watching. To stay up to speed on all things Formula One, make sure you hit the subscribe button.